Hi guys, and welcome back to another video. So I've recently received the TourBox Lite from TourBox, and I've used their Elite and their Neo in the past as well, so I'll make sure to leave those videos linked in the description if you're curious about those models or my previous experience using them. But when I did use the Neo and the Elite models, they have always been fantastic to work with, and they really sped up my workflow. It kind of felt like a smoother workflow by having everything I need at my fingertips, and I kind of get to focus mostly on drawing without having to fumble and look away from the monitor as much when I'm drawing. Since the Lite comes in a different layout than the previous two models, I did spend some time learning and trying to get accustomed to the new device, so sorry if the footage is a bit more sporadic as I worked on a few different things during the time and I was trying to get used to it. But if you've never tried out TourBox before, you don't really need to worry about that, as I found it really easy to get accustomed to. So part of the footage will be me working on a small animation of my OC Kaisen. So let's start off in Clip Studio Paint as I explain how much the TourBox Lite kind of sped up my process for making this particular piece. But before we jump in, if you are not familiar with TourBox, this little compact device makes drawing and editing and navigating different programs such a breeze, but also adds that sense of tangibility and tactility that I think digital drawing sometimes lacks a little bit. Though it cannot really replace the keyboard, as you might have to still type, it can still change a lot of your typical multi-key shortcuts kind of into just one click. The device itself has a very well thought out layout with several buttons, including a knob and a wheel. But the best part is that even with all these buttons, you can have even more at your fingertips by combining these buttons and actions. Now, luckily, TourBox has several presets that are made by their team, as well as other artists who have contributed to submitting their own shortcuts and preferences. I like that you can download these different presets and add them to your TourBox. That way you aren't too intimidated to set all these buttons to something new. So for this footage, you can see at the bottom left-hand corner that I have set the camera on my hand so you can see how frequently I'm using some of the buttons. So I mentioned that I like tactility when I draw, so kind of one of the reasons I sometimes prefer drawing on Procreate on the iPad is because it feels more tactile, but the TourBox actually brings in that seamless tactility to your drawing experience because the way that they designed the hardware and also the software feature support to really kind of allow yourself to switch between the different functions, and it feels very intuitive with the scroll wheel and the knob. So something that a keyboard really can't do or provide. So for example, I tend to pan and zoom in a lot, so I find myself using the wheel and the knob more and more as I worked to kind of prevent myself from having to dart around on the canvas or on my tablet screen to change brush sizes or to zoom in and out. The tactility of the knob and the wheel make it super intuitive on making those actions versus me clicking like a key to kind of zoom in and out versus just me seamlessly kind of just turning the knob, and I can kind of endlessly and quite easily zoom in and out and or pan. It also helps you focus on what I'm working on without having to constantly reach outside of the menus. Reaching and having to select other menus does sometimes make your workflow a little bit slower and kind of takes you out of the process. So while I was coloring Kaisen, I found it was easier to paint when I could allow myself to adjust the brush size with the knob rather than using the menu. I oftentimes select the wrong brush size and I have to reselect over and over, switching between the smaller and larger sizes and always checking to see if the brush size was correct. But with the knob, there is less darting around. I can easily see, and it kind of feels a little bit more natural seeing the increase and the decrease of the size of the brush as I paint. So apologies for not having the entirety of the footage being filmed of the drawing portion for Kaisen. I only was able to film snippets as I was a little bit busy and my computer was having some issues. But here is the finished illustration of Kaisen, and I've already split up the parts so that it's ready for rigging. So this device is not only bound to only drawing programs, but many other programs as well as Live 2D. So I wasn't really expecting to find a preset for Live 2D, but to my surprise, there were actually a few on their website. So I downloaded them after I was already finished with the rigging and the animation. I found out later that there was an easier way to make my warp deformers and just assign that to a button on the TourBox Lite. I guess, the more you know. But using the TourBox alongside with the mouse actually helped me a lot to alleviate some of the stress from the pain and clicking of zooming in and out with only my dominant hand. I was able to allow myself to separate them so that the TourBox can help me maneuver some other actions in Live 2D much easier while I leave my clicking a little bit to just my dominant hand. Now with the rigging of Kaisen being done, I will show you some small snippets of me adjusting my keyframes to make Kaisen's animation. Since the rigging is kind of the harder and more tedious part, the animation is just a bit of trial and error as I test out what works out the best with the timing. With him being all finished, here's kind of the final animation of Kaisen. So I've tested out the TourBox Lite in Clip Studio Paint, a little bit in Paint Tool SI. I'll make sure to put some footage in so you guys can see me working as I'm painting. I've used it in Live 2D for rigging and the animation as well. And one more thing that I found that it helped out with was editing. So I didn't really find any presets for Wondershare Filmora, which is the editing program that I usually use nowadays. I ended up mapping my own shortcuts that I tend to use to the TourBox. It's quite easy, and I just open up the keyboard preferences as well as the TourBox application and match my most used shortcuts, and it's super easy to snip and delete the clips with just one click of a button each. And it made it a little bit easier for me to navigate my timeline, as I know it's a little bit annoying to do that with just one scroll wheel on the mouse. So with one more quick drawing session in the background, my overall experience with this model has been wonderful, as it was super easy to get used to and adjust to the actions towards my workflow. If you draw with your laptop, I highly recommend using something like this, because your laptop being your main screen and having the TourBox actually works out pretty well, since you don't need to also move your laptop closer to reach your keyboard. Keep it at a good distance and keep the TourBox close to you, on the side, on your lap, on the screen, like I did for this session, since the screen is so large, and it makes it a little bit easier to keep everything kind of like contained, so I'm not like outstretching my body too much in a weird way. But since I've used all of their models now, if you had to ask me which one I prefer to work with, it would actually be the Lite model. If you are like me and kind of find that too many choices might make you feel intimidated, then the Lite model is kind of the way to go. I found it a lot easier for me to not feel the need to fill up every button combination to things that you might use super often, and it's very easy to assign certain buttons to make it feel very natural to your workflow. The Lite model is still really powerful, even though the price for this model is under $100, a lot more cheaper comparing to their other models. It's by far the best editing console that I've used that was under this kind of $100 range, because you still get to use all of their software features as well as have a plethora of buttons for you to make combinations and shortcuts at your disposal. So please definitely check out TourBox Lite, or if you're looking for something to help you with your existing workflow without breaking the bank, then this is a great option. But if you have a higher budget, then do check out their other models as well, as they have even more functions that might suit your workflow even more than this one. So I hope you guys enjoyed the drawing and animation of Kaisen today, the little doodle and some of the snippets of me working kind of like in different programs using the TourBox Lite, and I'll see you guys next time in the next video. Bye!